It's Ginny, Eli, and Tim from DS Tech in the beautiful Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We're going to talk about 3D printing and some of the cool things that we can do with 3D printers. But before I do, make sure you go to dstech.net, sign up for our newsletter so you get all the kinds of news. I have some interesting articles coming out. And what else? Oh, there's a form on there that you can fill out if you need a free assessment for your business. So 3D printing, this is a cool topic.
Yeah.
My son has one.
Okay.
Because he's in computer engineering.
Yep.
So he
Very
uses
cool.
it for his projects, and it was not expensive, believe it or not.
Nowadays, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about
wasn't.
it today is, you think of 3D printing, you think thousands of dollars to get this machine, the filaments, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, where do you need to have a clean room so there's no dust in it, all this kind of stuff. But nowadays, you can get like a 3D printer for a couple $100. Some filaments like $15, $20. So, I mean, it's still some money, it's a good chunk of change, but you're not spending thousands what used to be. It's a couple $100 to get started. And obviously, as you go and scale and try to make bigger things, I mean, you can still spend thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
but there's no need for
Something
that for
bigger.
when your kids are just learning the tech, and that's kind of getting
And
to
a
the
lot of
phase.
schools have them.
A lot of schools have them now
Right.
too, exactly in their labs. So if you have one at home, your kids can like design stuff at home, and if maybe your 3D printer at home can't technically print it, they could take it to the lab at school and then print out on a bigger printer, things like that. So, so I was just going to kind of go through some different use cases that people are using, in the world and the industry for fun, and it's kind of where it's making its changes and things like that. So,
Is it true that you
awesome.
can build a house with one?
yes
Like
and no.
one brick at a time.
It's not like it's going to be fully automated, but there are that I have down in construction. I will have.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that.
There is.
Depends
There
on the
is.
Sorry, it
House.
just popped into my head.
Yeah,
I was like,
yes,
Huh.
different parts of it. Yes. So to start, I guess I just started with a silly one. Prototyping. A lot of times, companies, if you're a manufacturer, for example, you're making a propeller for a boat, but you have a new design you think might be more. Not aerodynamic, but whatever it is in the water.
Hydrodynamic.
Hydrodynamic.
Yeah.
There you
we
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So rather than
He's a smart
create
guy.
an actual new part, you just prototype it. You can test it out. A lot of the prototype stuff they'll do because a lot of the material still isn't 100% structurally intact. So like if you're printing with metal, you're still only like 98, 90% as structurally intact as if traditional manufacturing. So you can't use it in production, but to do a prototype, test some stuff. A lot of people are doing it because it
Cool.
saves a lot of money than doing the traditional way. Spare parts. A lot of times if you have a little device that has a little plastic part in it or something that breaks, a lot of times you're like, oh, I can't just create a new little plastic component, but now you can because most of the hard plastics, PLA is pretty decent. So if you have a little device or something like that that kind of breaks, you can just print out some spare parts for it, pretty easily.
My son did. He printed out some kind of little plastic holder for something, and I was like, "This is
a
so
lot
cool."
of kinds.
Neat.
I know he does the action sports, so my thought is it probably was for his GoPro.
It probably
like,
was.
Like on your bike or your different things, you can print out different custom. You don't normally have to buy these things, but you just go online and print them out at home now. Now you can print out your own little.
Yep, he did,
Things like that. So
and he
it's kinda
improved it a little bit.
Yeah, you can take your own design and then you can add in. Be like, if you ever get something, you're like, oh, this is great, but I wish it just did this extra little thing.
Yeah.
Well, now you can take some
Now you
product
can.
like that and then add it in and make it yourself. It makes it easier to do that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So customized products like jewelry, engraving, that kind of stuff. So normally you might get a little jewelry or necklace, but now with 3D printers, they're like kind of able to engrave little things on the side of cups and little things, those little knickknacks, things like that are kind of.
Oh, well.
You can make a little pencil holder.
I
that'll
didn't know
say
you could
DS
use
Tech
it
on
for that.
Or whatever,
Yeah, I had no idea.
different things. Yep.
Oh,
Cool.
because we usually use a Dremel for that, but
Yeah, to
sometimes
actually
sure.
like take something and out. But what it is, it's printing something and then it's leaving the recess area
Oh,
open, so it looks
okay.
like it's engraved, but it's not. It's because it's making the thing.
it's
but-
making the
but then-
thing, and
but
then it
leaving
has
out the area that you want engraved, so that way it stays
Oh,
empty,
cool.
kind of. Just kind of like
Very
custom little jewelry and things like that.
It's a good person creating.
Education
Yeah.
is a lot of times where you're seeing a lot of these 3D printers, like you said, in the labs now at school, in the tech labs, robotics labs, all that kind of stuff. You're getting them because not only are you learning like 3D modeling and CAD design, but you're also learning like to be able to do the 3D printing. There's certain things, for example, when it prints layer by layer, you actually get a better design if you printed something on its end because of the thickness of the layers going up is thinner than the actual width of the actual nozzle. So you can kind of learn some different things printing and playing that you get with that. So education, they're definitely doing it. Again, the robotics, because you could just print a part for your robotics arm, and it's a lot cheaper for schools to be doing that than also buying all the parts for the robotics classes too. So it's a win-win for them, for the schools. Medical applications. This is actually a big one where I see it can actually help out a lot with the field of prosthetics. I actually saw a video, it's a couple years old now, but there was a boy who had lost his arm in some sort of accident. And rather than spending, say, $10,000 on a prosthetic arm that looks like, Roy Munson's arm from that movie where it's just like this fake arm that's not very good, they spent like $400 on it looked like the Terminator's arm, all skeletonized or whatever. It's what the boy wanted. And he had this prosthetic arm that actually had the thumb would move. So he could actually grab things and use it.
That's cool.
Versus the other prosthetic arms, which aren't that usable.
Wow.
And he was so happy when he had it. It was so cool to see. And that was $400 versus $10,000. I mean, that's just insane. The cost savings you're saving for the families too. So where you can get things for people that maybe not be able to afford them. So that's to me where it can really make advancements in the medical industry. I saw something too where they like 3D printed like a fake trachea for like a baby that couldn't breathe. And so like they were able to save the baby's life before they could never do that kind of a thing. Because you can't just make a fake trachea because the plastic will not be absorbed in the body and it's able to whatever sort of be okay. So I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool too. So they're able to print and kind of do things on demand. Eventually, at the medical point, I would like to get to the point because my teeth are a little janky. 3D print some teeth out, just boom,
There you go.
way cheaper.
Yeah.
Eventually, that can be kind of too. I know they're already doing that, but it's still extremely expensive. But the cost eventually will come down on that too. So
that's cool. That's cool.
Construction. So now this is kind of going where you were like, can you just 3D print a house now? Well, not technically, but what they're actually doing is they're 3D printing the foundations and the bases in some parts of the house. They actually do have a machine, a robot that it's like a little crane almost on a little robotic thing, and it'll go around the edge and perimeter, and you can feed it a design, and it will basically plant down cement, as like a foundation, and then some other stuff like that too. So they're experimenting with that. So they at least get parts of the house. And now after you get a foundation, you can make a robot that might somehow be able to like put what I don't know.
I don't know where I read it, and I don't know if it's even real.
And maybe like dome houses, like if you made an entire house out of like a concrete thing that started, wide and kind of at the very end of the print capped itself like a giant rounded teepee or something.
Yeah.
I could see you could have a 3D printed fully house like that, at least for the outside.
Yeah.
Right. Still would need to do the inside and stuff, and all the plumbing, electrical, all that
I
kind of
had
stuff,
read that the military uses some really big 3D printers to print.
You make campings real quick and stuff like that. Probably it wouldn't.
I'm not sure
surprise me,
what's real, and I don't remember where I got the information. So it just.
Usually military tech is 10, 15 years ahead.
Yeah,
of
for sure. Usually,
I could definitely see that being a thing. I haven't looked into the construction recently. I just know the foundations was definitely a thing last time I looked at it.
Interesting.
And then they're obviously working on automating more and more components because the idea that you could just have maybe 3 or 4 different printers, you just let them go at different stages, and then you still can print the whole house for the most part, and then have someone button it all up at the end.
Interesting.
So yeah, construction is definitely where they're using it. They're not using it in production and construction again because the strength of it just isn't quite there yet.
That makes sense.
Food industry. So this is kind of more of a nuanced, fun one. If you're like food, 3D printing food, what's this? No, I'm not talking about growing.
Are we gonna have automatic things where you just say?
It's more for like cakes and design. So people are making a cake, and they actually have 3D printers that have different like whatever cake,
like piping tips and stuff.
Piping tips, all the different things like that. So they're able to make custom designs on tops of cakes automatically, quickly, and stuff like that. So
cool.
That's kind of where it's going with that. You see some of the crazy future sci-fi stuff where they're trying to print meat and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't
stick to cupcakes.
Yeah, I'll stick to cupcakes. I'm going to avoid that one there. Aerospace and defense. Now that's one where they're using a lot of this 3D printing because you can do. It's called additive manufacturing. Because back in the day, you take your metal from the ground, you make your iron ore, you melt it down, you make you smelt your iron pieces, and you have big sheets of metal or whatever, and you have to cut out your pieces from that metal and then add them to make your components. Well, the idea of taking a big sheet and then taking out pieces you need is old. The idea now is that you have nothing and you slowly are just adding in what you want by printing the material. So this allows for a way of engineering that used to never exist before. Like you could have a bolt that's tightened and fastened inside of an entire enclosed thing with space in there because of the way that you're able to print it, where in the real world you could never have a bolt inside of a certain thing like that because so you can create some sort of like geometric shapes that never existed before. The idea like that is like you could take an I-beam that normally it would be say, this is just making random up, let's say 2 tons of strength or whatever, you can basically have that I-beam be spider webbed so fine that it actually is using say 75% less material at the end of it but there's tiny little spider webs all through this I-beam in a certain way, and it actually is as strong if not stronger than a traditional I-beam. because of the way it's engineered with so many little spider
Sure,
webs in there.
sure.
So you're using less material and it's lighter. And so they're finding ways to use this to create new things that haven't existed before. And that's
Huh.
where you're going to see that in like the
Very
aerospace
cool.
defense area where they have lots of money to try to spend on different ways of designing things, because the idea of just slowly adding, one layer of atoms at a time to something, you can create some weird stuff that
Yeah.
never used to be able
That's
to do before.
interesting.
So it's like you see those pictures of like the impossible cube that's like twisted within itself or weird things like
Oh,
that. It's like you can
yeah.
print that and you can actually make those things a reality now because of 3D printing. So that's kind of neat. So then we
Is
have
art on your list? That made me
that's-
think of art.
That's the next one actually. It's
Okay.
art, sculptures, and museum preservation is a big one where people might get, say, a
Uh-oh.
bone from like an archaeological dig, and they're like, well, what would this look like? And they could feed those models into a computer and actually make like a 3D printed skull of what someone would look like now. And so they're using it for like a lot of artifacts that are real that may be hard to preserve. They're making like fake versions of the artifacts to put in museums and things like that.
So
that's
they
kind
can
of-
like fill in the blanks,
Sure.
Kind
right?
of, yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit. So they're using it
Interesting.
for that, and then obviously just standard art, making weird designs, sculptures, things like that.
To
Sculptures
make your
are more
brain
for
hurt
like games
to look at.
where people make little miniatures for their like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Or their other little
Oh,
games.
sure.
You
That's
just
no
I
problem.
remember as a kid, it was
Right.
expensive to go get those miniature figurines. They're like $8-10 a piece and all this stuff. Well,
You
now
just
it's like
print
I
it
get some
out
plastic and
for
print it and
$3.
paint it yourself at home
Boom.
now. So exactly. And then the last part is just the environmental applications. So a lot of times they're with the recycling and things like that. You can actually buy plastics now that are 100% plastic material. So the stuff you're printing isn't plastic that you're just adding to the problem. So they're just kind of adding to that with the environmental applications, being able to purchase, reuse, that. And then they're also using it in the actual manufacturing where you might have like a rubber thing where I saw they were trying to take a bunch of tires, melt them down, and then 3D print new tires out of them. Just in so that's more manufacturing. It's not 3D printing. You're just creating a device to do this. But the idea that you can maybe get it down on a smaller scale so that individuals can do it, that's kind of where I see that tech being helpful too. Is it won't just be recycling plants, but maybe you could buy some sort of hopper where you can melt stuff in it and it'll print out material down the road. Who knows? But
Interesting.
Kind of neat where you could self-recycle at home with a little setup or whatever. So
Cool. That's
Very
good
cool.
information.
so that's a lot of stuff. I know I kind of went through it all, but that there's so much with 3D printing. It really, you can get into each topic more narrowly as you go through, but it's come a long ways over the last few years. And it's not just for printing little figurines as much as that's usually what you start
Right,
doing
that's the
with it.
first thing
So,
you think of, right?
Yeah,
Or like my
little
son's
trinkets,
little,
or you make little game tokens. It's like, oh no, I lost a little. We play a game called Ticket to Ride, and it's got little plastic trains, and it's like, oh, you lose some of the trains rather than order new game pieces. You could just print some at home to make your own.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, but there's a lot more things that are out
Yeah.
there that we don't typically do at home, but
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting stuff. So welcome to the world of 3D printing. I mean, it sounds like a rabbit hole we can go down
Yeah,
to.
there's always
So-
different things, but the biggest takeaway is it's not that expensive to get into now. For a couple
Yeah.
$100, you can buy a machine, get the software for free on your computer, and just play with it. That's the way.
You
with
could
it.
be the next inventor of something like the paperclip.
Yeah.
There you
knows?
go.
That's
Yeah.
just some idea. That's really great. That's what a lot of people are doing. Is
Yeah.
Making up little,
I did read a story
And
about
people are sharing their designs online. Like if you come up with a good 3D
Yeah.
printer design, you could actually monetize your design and
Yep.
sell your design to other people. If you
I've seen
wanted
that too on Etsy.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
sell their designs all the time.
Yep.
It's interesting stuff. Okay, so go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, and get your free assessment, whatever you want over there at dstech.net. And we'll see you next time. Who knows what we'll bring to you.
Yeah.
Make it a great day.